Business Recovery, a conversation with business guru Hank Moore. Part of the series, Titans of Mediation, with seasoned mediator trainer Dr. Barbara Sunderland Manousso. That is our topic for today. Welcome to the Lawyers and Mediators International Show and Podcast by InstantMediations.com, where we discuss law and conflict resolution topics to educate both professionals and everyday people. Catch regular episodes on YouTube, the Instant Mediations app, and anywhere you get your podcasts. Just remember, nothing in these episodes constitutes legal advice, so be sure to talk to a lawyer, as cases are fact-dependent. Hi, everyone. This is attorney Mac Pierre-Louis, arbitrator mediator, working throughout Florida and Texas.
And Natalia Orłowska-Czajka, advocate, mediator, and arbitrator from Warsaw, Poland.
And I'm Dr. Barbara Sunderland Manousso in Houston, Texas, and Newport, Rhode Island. And I'm a trainer and a mediator and an arbitrator, and most of all, an admirer of Hank Moore. And he is our Titan for mediation today under Manousso Musing. And welcome, Hank. We're so happy to have you on our program. And it's a delight always to hear from you. You have been a resource for 100 of the Fortune 500 companies, working with over 6,000 companies around the world. And you have had so much impact as a visionary and as the fix-it man for these companies. So we're very, very pleased today to have you talk about business recovery. Some of our interest was with the COVID, how it impacted companies, but there's always going to be something. And that's the opportunity that I want you to talk about. Mediation is a huge business, as is all alternative dispute resolution. So, Hank, we look forward to your pearls of wisdom today. So, what does business recovery? What does that mean to you, and what does that mean to the business community?
Well, it means where things are headed next, and how you're going to get there, and how you're going to measure the effectiveness, and then how you plan for the next phase without forgetting that crises do keep coming up in business. I mean, we've experienced 9 recessions in the last 50 years. Then we've had other kinds of crises, including the COVID period. It took a big toll on business and on the modern workforce, which we talked about in the previous issue. It also took a toll on community stewardship, which we talked about previously, because nonprofit organizations were struggling to serve a lot more people. So with crisis comes opportunity to learn from what you did right and wrong, usually right, and somehow move it into the future, because there's always a future. Standing still is not an option.
And Hank, I just wanted to mention, this is a series, and you have been a guest on Manousso Musing. So we do have in our library some previous recordings with you, which is terrific. And today's session, which we're just delighted about, will focus on your 14th or 13th book. You're just amazing. You've written 14 books, and 7 have been nominated for Pulitzer Prizes. And the book that we're going to kind of focus on and some of the content of it today, if you want to just even hold it up, is exciting. The Big Picture of Business, of course, by
Book 4.
Forward.
Book 4 in the series.
This is the book 4 of the series
on with the subtitle, The Value You Deserve.
On the value you deserve. And so we're just delighted that this is an opportunity for the mediation and the ADR community to see where they fit, because everybody's doing employment mediations and arbitrations.
Yes, thank you again, Hank,
Pleasure.
for the return. I'm going to be sharing my screen, and just to show your website in case people want to connect with you, that's hankmore.com. Pretty easy. It's actually a good website domain because it's so short and it's to the point, and everyone, you can't get lost, right? So if they want to check out that book, they're more than welcome to head over to the site and see basically your repertoire and access to all your materials and books. And if you are listening to this recording, head over to the YouTube so you can actually see what I was just screen sharing, but check it out yourself, hankmore.com. So, Hank, let's talk about conflict. We all went through the shock of COVID-19 and what it did to businesses, and then businesses trying to come out of that slump. And now it seems we're going back into another one now with this whole recession thing hanging over our heads. But
Right.
how has this, in your opinion, transformed the dynamic, I guess the conflict dynamic between managers, owners, and leaders, and the masses, the workers, employees, people, the regular people? Can you give any idea on that?
Well,
If you
the splintering of the workforce is a concerning thing. I mean, Zoom brought about wonderful opportunities for people to communicate like we're doing today. But with the workforce getting so splintered, a lot of the discipline went away. And of course, effective management of companies is not about do it as I say, do it. It's do it as let's do what's in the best interest of A, our customers, B, our stakeholders, and the marketplace in general. And you need to look at all those things. So business recovery from COVID is a good opportunity to look at what we were doing wrong before COVID. In my professional opinion, of all the businesses that went out of business during COVID, about probably 25% of them should have anyway. They had troubles brewing that one more crisis took them over the brink. They hadn't planned, they hadn't strategized. A lot of businesses hadn't recovered yet from the economic crisis of 2008, 2009, 2010. You know, there's this idea of, well, the latest crisis is gone. We dodged the bullet. Let's go back to what we were doing. That idea, that mindset is what causes businesses to sink.
Oh,
Having
One of-
listened to what you've just said, that would be great if you could tell us what modern technologies might bring to the business recovery. Because this is what we were forced to concentrate upon when we were going through COVID. Technology really grew in its role in every single business. We
Mhm.
wouldn't have lived without it. But
Correct.
how is it going to help us moving forward?
Well, in the book, actually, I talked about technology. There is a topic in Big Picture Business, book 4 on. It's called "The Masters of Repurposing: How Technology Created Opportunities." The Zoom technology is something that I've been involved in. I know Barbara probably has too. For many, many years, Zoom has been around since 2004, and most of us participated in what was called intranet. It's just that the general public got introduced to Zoom and the other Restream and the other technologies and started using it. But the main thing that we did in the early days of the Zoom technology was to try and get conversations with management teams going. One of the things that I've been doing for years has been to do work team development, strategic planning, making sure that people are on the same page and that they're headed in the same positive, success-oriented direction. You know, the reason that employees don't perform is they don't know what's expected of them. They don't know what's possible. And in tough times, what you say is When do you try new ideas? When times are tough, yes. When times are great, yes. Every time in between, yes. It's just that with modern technologies, people can communicate more about what they're seeing on the horizon. The biggest issue, the biggest problem with business in general, and I've been observing businesses for 60 years, the good, the bad, and the ugly of it. But the problem is they all want to just stay entrenched in what they think worked for them in the beginning. Core business changes for every business. Technology doesn't create the change, it facilitates the change. Planning and strategy. And what leads to a lot of conflicts in business is where people think their piece of the pie is the most important piece of the pie, their niche, their idea of business strategy, to which leads them to go into silos and not communicate with the others. So there's nothing wrong with learning more about what the other niches are doing. That gets you more of a big picture focus. And that's why I use the book title term. I've been using the term big picture business for a lot of years. It's just that a, it's on 4 books now. But with opportunity comes, you can't always go back. One of the things that I do when I do strategic planning for companies is we go back and we look at what we did right, what we did wrong. Guess what? Most businesses do 3 times more right than they give themselves credit for doing. And when you go back and reflect on what brought you to the present, it's not that the technology changed, it's that you learned how to work with people and ideas and use the technology as tools of the trade. So the answer is all of the above, but that's what a visioning program for a company. You go back and you look at what sunk us during the COVID years. What were the crises that we averted? Because research tells us that 85% of the time, if you plan for the next crisis, you will avert it.
Hank, you said something also a moment ago that people, business is made up of people. And
Mhm.
one of the problems that people, the businesses are taking their service to is avoiding people. And we
Right.
get caught in these cues, push this button, push 30 minutes later, you're still pushing buttons through a queue that seems to disconnect us from the service we're trying to seek. Could you
That's
talk
called
about that?
rabbit holes. They go down rabbit holes and
Rabbit
they spend
holes.
more time trying to navigate the rabbit hole than to strategize the business.
And since mediation is a personal business, it's a small business for most, I would say 99.9% it's small business.
Mhm.
And but it's big business, it's big money. It's just they're small companies.
Small
You
business
are
is
the
not
business, you
small,
are the
not
brand.
small
Sorry?
minded, right?
Sorry?
The small business, saying the term small does not make them small minded. I have worked with, as you said, a lot of businesses of all sizes. I don't just work with large corporations. And the problem, or the opportunity, I should say, what I've noticed about small businesses is the principles of small businesses and mid-sized businesses wear about 10 hats every day.
Mhm.
And guess what? They get really good at 8 of them, which is 7.5 hats more than the average corporate mid manager ever gets good at. The problem with too much segmentation and too much of a corporate strategy that says, I will edict what we're going to do and you will follow my plan and you will scurry and do what I tell you. That's an old management style called the captain of industry style of management that really went out of style in the 1930s, though some people refused to acknowledge it. And
Wow.
and in one of my books, I think it was Big Picture, book two. I think I talked about how different this was. Book two of the series, and I talked about rabbit holes. There's a chapter on that. I talked about workforce issues, how people take their bad behaviors into the workforce, and that they by default become corporate culture problems. So there's an opportunity in mediating is to get people on the same page to where they put the customer, where does the customer figure in all of this? The customer is your first priority, your second priority, and your third priority. And that gets into customer service, customer focused management, which is the dominant style of business and has been for 20 years, though people that are still stuck in the captain of industries style of management refuse to recognize it. And then the third area about the customers is bring them into the discussion more. What I would suggest is the same thing that I suggested after the recession of 2008, 2009. In rebuilding your company, there's nothing wrong with opening up the communications better with customers. You know, I think one of the best recommendations I would make today about business recovery is write up a very thoughtful letter. Everybody in business should do this. It's kind of like when we write these Christmas letters families do
Mhm.
at the end of the year. Oh, we did this,
Keeping
we
people
did
up to
that,
date. Yep.
we learned this, we achieved that. Why couldn't businesses do that? My recommendation is write up a, a, a very short but to the point letter and send it to customers and invite their feedback. There's nothing wrong with coming to customers for their ideas, treating them like experts. I think you will find when you do that, that the potential conflicts may be reduced. The more people think you really care what they think earlier, sooner. I mean, I recommend that companies do this letter once a year. It could be at the end of the year, it could be at the beginning of the year. All you want is to get input and advice from those who could help you. Um, most businesses operate way too much in vacuums, and that's why they lose customers. That's why they lose market share. And then they look up and say, oh, well, somebody stole our business. Let's sue them. That's too late. You should avert the conflict.
Thank
That's
you.
excellent advice. Matt,
Yeah, yeah.
go
Because
ahead.
of time, we won't be able to ask too many more questions. However, just
Yeah.
wanted to uh, well, by the way, what you just said about inviting, well, I guess you said send a letter out, let people know what you've done, but also invite their feedback so that you can take, give them a seat at the table so that they can put input. But do you think that might also open a door where you're going to be told things that you don't want to hear? Might that produce more conflicts, or is it best or is that worth it still? Because that's better than avoiding the conflict because it's going to come in anyway. What do
Oh,
you?
it's worth it because you're asking people, you're treating them like experts, not like they're there to confront you. I mean, and town hall meetings, and now that we have the technology like what we're participating in right now, this is an opportunity to have more meetings. You don't just send a letter out at the end of the year and say things were good, but we made some changes, we learned, we grew. But I think a lot of companies should be doing Zoom forums to talk to customers more often and give people a chance to sometimes ask the hard questions. But I think you'll find I have a concept that I talked about actually in this book, book 3. This was the book where I talked about how the workforce brings their bad behaviors into the companies. And by the way, the bad behaviors are not from the rank and file employees. They're from the management who gets very stuck and sedentary. They have this do as I say mentality. So the people that I advise are the ones that say do as I say, and I try to neutralize that mindset and and remind them. There was a very famous CEO named Lee Iacocca who turned around
I
uh,
remember him.
uh, Chrysler
Yeah,
Corporation. He had been at Ford. Henry Ford was jealous of him because he thought up the Mustang and it wasn't Ford's idea, and he basically ran him out the door. Well, Lee Iacocca, and I know because I advised Lee Iacocca during his move to Chrysler. He used to go down on the floor of the factories, and he had index cards in his hand. Hi, Joe. I just want to thank you for that job you're doing. Hi, Mary. I understand your kid is doing really well in school. Your whole family brings an awful lot to this company. Where do you think he got that idea of the index cards? From me.
there you go.
What in today's world, if more people would walk around with their handheld devices with information that could really inspire the employees? Why are you doing that? Because you want to avoid burnout, you want to avoid people stealing intellectual property and going across the street. You want to understand that they're all making an opportunity to recover the business, whether it's from COVID, whether it's from the next recession, whether there's always going to be up and down turns in business. How are you going to navigate it? How are you going to reduce the potential conflicts that could kill your business? It's all about strategy. It's not just marketing. It's not just technology. It's how the strategy is the umbrella over it all, the overview.
Hank, again, your information is right on point. The whole basis of mediation is that a mediator helps their clients communicate. And it's these little communication tips that you're even recommending. When the parties have an opportunity to talk to each other, they can build solutions. And so the communication is so important. I
Mm.
value so much having uh, your information. And again, we're delighted today to have our business guru, Hank Moore, talking about the 4th book of his series of Big Business. And he's has so much information and so many wonderful tips for mediators, arbitrators, any size business to be able to go forward. Do we have any other questions as we
Yes, I
wrap
did
up?
want to follow on something
Okay,
because
thank
you
you.
started saying, to me, the core idea of every single business is a human being. We either provide service to human being, we have customers, we work with other people, other mediators, other people who are actually coming to us. You've just said some tips how we can approach the outside world in terms of meeting the clients. But what did this crisis teach us in terms of how we should approach employees
Mhm.
and or other coworkers that we are having to enhance business, to enhance better relationships? And so what would be the core of what you perceive in this respect?
The the best thing we pick up from that is that we all need to learn what didn't work first, what the challenges are, and but more importantly, the opportunities. Too many people spend time dealing with problems and not focusing on opportunity because there's, people say to me all the time, Oh, there were the good old days, to which I interrupt them and say, the good old days are now. The good old opportunities are now. What may have worked in the past, we can learn about business strategies that worked well, business strategies that didn't, but we don't want to live in the past. We want to learn from it.
Again, thank you so much, Hank. Hank Moore, our business guru, thank you for being with us today. We
Thank
value
you.
your information and your input.
My
Thank you
pleasure.
so much.